Welcome to TradeTheNBI.com. This is John. This report is for the 2nd of September. Continuation of that softness here as we continue to be below the blue azure lines down here on the shakeout, which indicates that you're not likely to get your turnaround just yet. You are getting into the oversold now that we've dipped below the negative 13, but it hasn't turned around. You can see even with the extreme histogram still below the red line. So weakness is still the general call, and again, like we talked about, the green ABM right there, nice pivot, and going in between now with the magenta white as flex points as well. So not bad as far as being able to see what the levels are that you want to be able to re-enter, exit, understanding that it's still weak, but overall our general bias is to the upside for the future going forward, at least till something changes with the election. I mean, if things start to get too tight and the street gets a little uncomfortable, we'll know, because we'll start to see it in the algorithms, and because the activity will start to people quietly changing their perspective. I don't think there's been any alteration in the street's view at this particular point. In Q, a little bit weaker than it had been. Finally, we get a little bit of the cyan starting to dip back below red, which should produce more bullish results. And the Dow is completely gone into the oversold category. And again, the green right there makes it an easy pivot right around. It's just hovering right underneath it. Oil, still nothing about it showing any signs of improvement. And that is just because as price changes, supply availability is just unlimited right now. Unless there's closing of the fracking process, and that there's still an unlimited capability to just ramp up production, and that's going to be problematic for any long-term rise, which is good for economic growth, because at some point there's going to be a need for additional oil, and then it will be available, and it shouldn't cause too massive a price increase, though I think a lot of traders would like to see it rise just inherently. Gold just oversold, is not really pointing to anything special there. And TLT, not surprising that it gave up a lot, but just came right back to the same equilibrium point. There really isn't anything going on. Likewise with the euro. Actually, I should blow that chart up a little bit. Let's go bigger with that. Get a little hard to see. I may change the paint bar on it. Come on, slide over. Let's do this one. There we go. Right back up here at the 50% retrace. So down, boom, 50% is your pivot point. That would be institutional guys coming into it. This particular point looks more weak than long at this juncture. We're about to see the orange dip below red, and that would be a new configuration. If the steel gets up to the 7, would be a setup for a potential turnaround long there. It hasn't quite taken place. Case chart. I thought this was an interesting one, because while we had the short, we ended up with the turnaround point that popped in right about here. It was a weak buy, number 2. All of those configurations were fine. And then we got right to the peak, and it dipped below, and it got into overbought here in the extreme, and then immediately gave a DOC spread right there to signal that it was time to take. I mean, it wasn't a whole lot of a trade, but doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be. Let's see what the entry was right about there, 63.75, and then by the time you ended up with that, it was 70. So 7 points is not bad, but it didn't trigger for a short given this setup until all the way over here, because that's when the cyan got above the 7.5, 7.2 range, and you might think, oh my god, that's so close to the end. Well, that was still at 61. And then it wasn't until the steel came right back above it after getting into the deep oversold right there. Your cover point would have been right around 56. So still 5 points, not horrible. But then it turned around with the bullish buy, the same as this one right there, and sort of a weak one. They tend to hit the short algo and just kind of flatten out. We can see that's exactly what's happened. Now, we haven't had a transition into a long setup yet, so it's still in what we would call a DOC spread, but neutral. in the sense that it's not tradable other than individual signals. And this is where you look for these individual signals, both for short and both for turnaround buy configurations. And that's how that has to get played during this. And what it's an indication of is that there's conflict in the algos and no one has taken a predominant lead. You can sort of see it in the 5K. We've had a beautiful run. Let me shrink it here because I pointed this chart out on the Skype chat. A little far back here. I gotta scroll back up to the forward part. So we started out pointing out this configuration with the DOC spread. Ended up with quite a few points lower back, and then we ended up with some long streaks, and that's just the market cooperating with the readings as they were, the algorithms. Each side would take a position, and it was a very strong move. Clear signals to the opposite direction. Let's scroll all the way to the end, I went too far. Right about there. So we talked about this one the other day when it actually turned into the short configuration. I'll zoom it back up. That was just showing a multi-day how successful it was in following everything. We ended up with our turnaround point where we ended up with the above 13.5 and below the negative 13.5 with the steel, and then we ended up with the secondary one. The first one was good enough to go ahead and call for when the steel dips below the 7.5, which was right there. Second one did the same thing and could have added to a position if you wanted to. I think that dip below the steel was right there. It was up a little higher at 59. We ended up with a 55 entry off the close, which is fine. We ended up with this beautiful one with a 13.5 and then the immediate spider of the Cyan, which is worth a plus 10. And we posted that in, and boom, beautiful with the plus 10. Took that right at the same time, another short setup developed. That one, more of a muck. I mean, you ended up with an MBI like right away. You ended up with it cycling straight down to give the weak buy signal, and every time the Cyan moved back above, it wasn't strong enough to generate a new buy signal, and you ended up with MBI, a GAM in that configuration, and then the trade actually ended right there, which was a 2-point negative to it, and then reinitiated a new short right about this particular point, but likewise producing the same conflict short end, but that's fine. I mean, you're going to get those, not a big deal. It's the algo play made a move and then it just sort of puttered and wasn't able to complete it. But you're going to get those, but minus a couple points is nothing compared to being able to capture what we did in the last couple of days of 30 plus points. So no objection to those kinds of moves at all. It's going to be part and parcel of it, and it's good to see that it happens that way because nothing's going to be 100%. But when you can mitigate the exposure by not being at a full point risk at that point, even when you can see how much further the target was, there's no point in risking it because you've got the move there. You're going to get another signal that will allow you for a re-entry coming back. So you just have to go with what is and take it as you see them come about, and it just keeps it clean without confusion. And there's nothing wrong with, like, even on the case chart that I showed, not even getting involved in a weak setup that doesn't really produce anything. You can wait. It just depends on how aggressive and how active you want to be with the trades, but you can certainly wait for the clean ones that just allow for nice big moves, and you just don't know when those are going to happen, so you just have to play what comes. So that's the basics of it. I'm still working on adjusting color transition to match these, and as soon as that happens I will send that out, and I'm hoping to match the shakeout to it as well, so that you'll be able to see some subtle variations in the coloring as we get this kind of buy signal, and then you get it a higher shakeout even though you're having matching still major lows with your DOC, and moving from light green maybe into the mid and dark greens, and then yellow warning as it gets a light yellow, so that or like the brown color, so that you have a warning sign when things are getting too much, and then obviously the red will pop up when it's time for short signals. So as always though, look for me on the Skype chat. Trade well. Talk again later.